This feels pretty good. Good afternoon. My name is Anita DeFrantz, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I was invited by your colleague, Robert, to speak with you. Aha! We have some more folks coming. Great.
I'm bringing my kids.
Great. I have the wonderful job of being president of LA84, which is the legacy of the 1984 Olympic Games. We were endowed with $93 million from those very successful games. That was 40% of the legacy, of the surplus rather, and I spent all that money. Why not? And I spent it to make sure that kids had the best experience with sports that we could provide. We do that, the foundation does that by providing grants to sports organizations. And we realized early on that money was not necessarily the only thing that you needed. And we realized that people needed to have a good understanding of how to coach. So we teach people how to coach, and for the last 10 years we've had a virtual library we're very proud of. It includes a whole world of history on the Olympic movement, on the history of sports. We have all of the official reports from the Olympic Games on this site, and I think we're one of the few sites to say that we're the only place where all of the official reports reside, and that's on our site. So we're 24/7, 365 on the Olympic movement. We have the Olympic Reviews, which is the history of the Olympic Games themselves. Now, I'm into sports because I believe that sports belongs to us as human beings. I've never seen another species set up hurdles and hop across those hurdles to see who can get there first. I've seen an ant crawl into a twig to get across a puddle of water, but I've never seen them line up those twigs to race across it. So it's something that we as human beings do. And if it's ours, it belongs to everybody. And for me, it's been very important to make sure that all young folks have access to sports, and all of us oldsters. I forgot to tell you, I am an Olympian, and I had the chance to row in one of those big twigs with 8 other people. I was a rower in the 1976 Games, and living in the Olympic Village changed my life. Why is the Olympic Village so special to me? Because it's a community of very successful people. Everyone there has been successful. They've been selected by their country to be there, and it's a remarkable thing to live in such a community. The community had all sizes, shapes, every skin color, and both sexes. And that means if we could do it for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we can certainly do it for a lifetime. In part, then my life has been dedicated to this idea that people can learn through sport, that sport is a powerful force in society, and it's a powerful force for change. The question I had put when I told Rob I was going to talk today was, how is it that I can be involved with getting kids interested in sports with all the ethical issues that have been put to us about sports, and how will that affect the Olympic movement, since I'm a member of the International Olympic Committee, which is like the board of directors of the Olympic movement. And it's important to me that kids have access to sport because of all the things it can do for them. It's immediate access to a community for girls to be able to take part in a team sport. You learn that you don't have to be alone. You learn that you don't have to work with only your very best friends. You learn that you can reach out to others, and most importantly, you learn that you can ask for help. And that lesson is really important, and it's going to be important for these next years in this whole world. So I want to make sure that everyone has access to it. Now, what about doping? What about drugs? I like to say no dopes in sport because it's a terrible thing. Some people posit that, well, why not let people use whatever it is? There are lots of reasons to not do that. First of all, we want, especially in the Olympic movement, we want sport to be safe and fair. We don't want people to die competing at the Olympic Games. And too often, these drugs which athletes take, you have no idea what you're really taking. You know, supplements, there's no control, quality control on supplements. So if you're taking supplements, or if you're taking drugs that are special designer drugs even, God only knows what's going to happen 10 years down the road if you're taking some designer drug. It's just unreasonable to ask for someone to take those risks. You may have heard that there's been research taken, so supposedly in Olympians or high-level athletes will say yes to the question, if you take this supplement, you're guaranteed to win a gold medal, but you'll be dead in 10 years. Will you take it? Well, that test has never been replicated. I think that someone just made up that idea, and it sounds like, of course, they'd say yes. But it's not true. It's not true. We just, the LA84 Foundation just finished a survey, and results are on our website. I'll do a little commercial for LA84foundation.org. We did a study with high school students in southern section of the California Interscholastic Federation to ask what they thought about doping, to ask if they were using drugs. We asked them if they were using drugs. We asked if they thought their teammates were using drugs, and we asked them if they thought their opponents were using drugs. Well, only 1% self-reported that they were using drugs. They felt that 10% of their colleagues might be, their own teammates might be, but they thought 20% of their opponents were possibly using it. They also said 65% of them said it would be okay to have testing in high school, which is very interesting, I think. Now, it wasn't a huge sample, and we're going to continue to ask these questions. It's the third of our approaches as a foundation to ask about doping. We held a conference way back in 1988 on doping, and we had one in the mid-90s, and we produced a book on it, and we want people to know what's wrong with it. It's because it's not safe. By the way, there's still one winner per medal, regardless of what you do. So isn't it better to be able to sleep? What's happening in the Olympic movement? Do I think that every athlete is taking drugs? No. I was one who did not, although I know for sure among my competitors it happened because I competed in the days of the East Germans where there was state-sponsored doping. And every time I look at that race, we come in third. But, you know, it's like I know that I did the best I could on that day, the very best. Today, yeah, there are people who are taking drugs. And again, we don't know what their future will be based on using these drugs that are not for use for healthy people. They're for people who are not healthy. And it's a shame. I think that they're cowards and cheats. They've stolen something. They've stolen something from themselves. If you can steal from yourself, they've stolen their own integrity. They've stolen from the other athletes the opportunity to be successful with integrity. And that's why in my sport, in rowing, we used to have a life ban. You were gone if you were caught doping one time. But with the the World Anti-Doping Code, we had to have rules that were modified so that folks who made a living in their sport could make a mistake, if you consider it that, and still be able to work in their sport. So I've given you kind of a flavor of things, an arc of getting into sport being something that belongs to us all, the issues that we're faced with, and the fact that the Olympic Games are very important. And I can tell you, if you ever have a chance to go to the Olympic Village and live there, you work with a lot of successful people here, so that gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like to live in that community and know that people from all over the world, right now, every morning, about 10,500 athletes get up, I hope brush their teeth, prepare for their day with the intention of competing starting on August 8th of 2008. The opening ceremonies will be at 8 p.m. in Beijing, and their story will be told before the entire world. And that's what will happen in just a few months. I thought I would just give you that flavor and then open the floor for any questions that you might have. I find that people have much more interesting questions than I've heard myself speak before anyway, so I would like to learn from you what you would care to hear about. Yes, sir.
Is there a prevalence I have two questions. One is there a prevalence of use, more of a prevalence of use by men than women? And is use on the rise, or is the perception of use on the rise?
Excellent questions. I'm not sure I can answer either of them. I don't know. My hope is that most athletes are smart enough to realize that they are going to get caught. They may not get caught at the time, as we found out recently. They're caught afterwards. And those who don't get caught have to live with the fact that it wasn't fair, that they used something, that they cheated. I don't think that it's on the rise. I think that because of the exposure of those who've been cheating, it's clear that it's tougher to get away with it for those who are on that very sharp edge that they believe it might be okay to cheat. It's less likely now. We've gone to what's called no-notice out-of-competition testing. Part of the problem before, and the reason the state-sponsored doping could happen, was the testing was only done at the Olympic Games, because that's the only time the IOC had control, and the IOC was the only group that was testing. So now we have no-notice out-of-competition testing, so we can surprise someone. And that's a better way to control doping than, you really do expect an athlete who's cheating to figure out that if you're still cheating when you get to the competition, there's a much higher probability that you'll get caught. So you cycle off, you find a way that you get the use, you get the benefit of the doping, which for steroids means that you can train more, you recover faster. It means that you can do a whole lot more work and be better able to maintain that level of work, so that when you're no longer taking the steroids, you continue to have that benefit. And that's what was happening. So I can't say whether it is or is not more. My hope is that it's less, and we're doing everything possible to make sure that it is less prevalent than before. Okay.
In terms of, because you are on the IOC, could you talk just a little bit about what it's like to be, you're a woman on the IOC, you're the U.S. rep on the IOC, you're an athlete on the IOC, and kind of what that perspective is and how kind of that works, because it's a little bit of a mystery, I think. You read about, the International Olympic Committee says, does, and there's intrigue and whatever, but just kind of like, what is it?
Well, it's a group of people who meet once a year. We come from about 76 different nations, and the age, I think the youngest member now might be around 30, and the oldest member now might be 80, trying to remember, we had our oldest member, our oldest member is about 87. And that's a lot of history, and the oldest member was an Olympian in water polo, actually, from Brazil. He was swimming or water polo. And he was president of FIFA and was a part of the great growth of international soccer. What is it like? I was the fourth woman elected to the IOC. We now have 16 women who serve on the IOC. What it's like is a group of people who are volunteers, who care about this very high-profile event, the Olympic Games, who have opinions. And we have a kind of a protocol where you sit on the basis of your election. So I do sit sometimes next to Prince Albert of Monaco, and then the Crown Prince of the Netherlands sits a few rows behind me because he was elected long after I was. And that's how we get along, because it's based on protocol order. We're all peers. And we all have different life experiences. My life experience is vastly different from the members I've just mentioned. And the wonderful thing is our mission is, and our responsibility is, to ensure that the Olympic Games endure and flourish. It's very important. The best part about being an IOC member is the fact that we get to present the Olympic medals. And there's nothing better than presenting a medal and saying to the person, "You shall forever be known as first and Olympic champion." And that's just the best of all. They, of course, don't remember me, but it's a real thrill for me to be able to do that. I certainly didn't know. Actually, a teammate said to me, you know, Anita, if we win a medal, the Lord's going to give it to us. Okay, divine providence, that's really good. I appreciate that. And she said, no, you nitwit. The president of the IOC, Lord Cullinan, will present the medals. I was like, okay, that's good. As long as we're across the line in time to win a medal. But it's a really great privilege to be able to do that. And we're the only ones who are allowed to make that presentation. So what's it like? It's unlike anything else in the world. And we get to do it for a long time.
I have one. I hope you don't think this is a crazy question, but with Marion Jones and all that we have talking, how do you guys handle when someone is stripped from the medals? And, you know, of course, that person's wrong, but my heart goes out to the people who they were competing because they will never know. And I understand it's just kind of automatically go to the second given thing, but how do you, it's like you can't replace that or relive it, but how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a terrible thing to have taken that away from others. You ask if you automatically go to the second. There's an interesting case that's presented because track and field for the 2000 games, the Track and Field Federation did not have a rule that automatically disqualified the whole team if one member was found guilty of doping. Yeah, they put that in place later. In my sport, one person is doped, even if it's the coxswain, and the whole boat is gone. But in that sport, that was not the rule, which is why the men's team, who had someone who competed in 2000 in the early rounds, who was found guilty of doping, so his medal was removed, but the rest of the team kept their medals. Now this time around, there's a desire to, you know, take a position and say, well, that's wrong. That might have been the rule then, but to me, now my lawyer hat goes on, which I don't usually let out of the bag that I am an attorney, but I can't help myself. The athletes competing then had no knowledge that if one member or two, or whatever the rule was, there wasn't a rule that if you won your medal in a team event and someone on the team was found guilty, it was silent. So that is, I'm sure, what the rest of the women on the team. Now, if it were an individual event, then yes, it automatically goes to the next person. And now the International Federation has fixed that rule so that if one person is found guilty of doping, then the whole team loses the medal. And it's different per sport. In soccer, for example, the rule is that there have to be 3 people on the team who are found guilty of doping before the medal's removed. So it's different. And I come from a sport where, again, we had 0 tolerance, and we just did something very remarkable. The Russian National Federation in rowing had, let's see how many, I don't want to exaggerate, I guess 7 doping cases within a year. And we have a rule that if you have more than 4, you might get banned. The federation might be banned, and we just banned them for a year. So none of the officials can take part in the sport. And you say, well, is that fair? What happens to the junior rowers, and how about the Olympic team? Well, it's up to them to develop a federation or an organization that can enter the teams. But none of the people who are part of the federation, officials, coaches, none of those folks can do anything, can be a part of any of the rowing federation's activities for a year. We're serious. No dopes in our sport. Yeah, it's really important. And that's the only way we can tell people and let athletes know that we're very serious about letting them have a safe and fair chance to compete. Yeah.
I was hoping maybe you'd talk a little bit more about ways to get kids interested in sports early on so they can be Olympians later.
All right, or not. They don't have to be Olympians. We believe that they'll be great citizens. We're doing a lot to do that. One of the things we have funded, we created an organization called Kids in Sports. And what we do is we go into parts of the city where there are not sports organizations, and we teach the volunteers, we teach the adults how to manage a team. And then we provide them with the education, the coaching, the structure, and the uniforms so that the kids have a good experience. And that's been going for 12 years now. And each year, about 9,000 kids have that opportunity. What we need is more volunteers. We need more volunteers because there are lots of kids out there. And what we hope is that when we say that we need a volunteer, people will raise their hand and say it's okay. It's a wonderful thing, especially because we'll make sure you know what you're doing. It can be uncomfortable. You know, it used to be that you get a clipboard and a whistle and expect to be able to coach. Well, that doesn't work very well. So we will guarantee you that you have education. Where do you go? There are lots of organizations out there now. I know that we're working with the middle schools. We just started a program with the middle schools. Last year we were in 7 middle schools in the LA Unified School District. This year, I guess this month, we're going to be at 82 of the middle schools, all the middle schools in LA Unified, and 20 parochial schools. So if you are close to a middle school and you want to help, you just let the principal know that you're interested in helping. Pick a sport. That's what I did. I started out by volunteering in my favorite sport, which was, of course, not surprisingly, rowing. And through that, I had more and more responsibilities over the years and wound up where I wound up. But it really starts with volunteering and picking a sport that you're willing to learn about and be there for kids. There are lots of other programs. You can come to our website or call our library, and we'll help you get hooked up with programs. Thank you. That's an important question. Yeah.
I have a sort of I played Ultimate Frisbee for many, many years, and we always talked about, boy, it would be great to see Ultimate Frisbee in the Olympics. And so I'm going to ask you, what would it take to get, the generic question could be, what does it take for a sport to become an Olympic game, and what would it take for Ultimate Frisbee to become an Olympic game?
Okay. Well, those fortunately are 2 separate questions. So let's talk about the process for being a sport getting on the program of the games. First of all, it has to happen 10 years in advance of the games. I'm sorry, 7 years in advance of the games. We select the site of the games 7 years in advance. So, yeah, last year we selected the site for the 2014 Olympic Winter Games. And in 2009, we'll select the site for the 2016 Olympic Games. So that's another interesting thing about being an IOC member. We're future-oriented. The Beijing Games are over, as far as we're concerned. We've moved on. So anyway, 7 years, you have to be prepared. And if you're, nowadays, I'm very pleased to say that you have to be a sport that has both women and men competing in it, which is a rather new part of how we view the world. So if the men are primary, then it has to be in, I believe, 4 continents of the world, and I forget right now. I think it's 75 countries have to be active in it. I think that's the number. And for women's sports, it has to be in 3 continents and 50 countries. It has to be active. And again, you have to prove this up in the years leading up to the 7 years before, and it's really hard to do. We unfortunately took 2 sports off the program for after the Beijing Games, and it's really unfortunate because they were baseball and softball. Yeah, so they will be conducted in Beijing, but they're working hard now so that they can be put back on the program. And the interesting thing was, although we took them off, we didn't put any sports on. And that was very interesting and very disappointing for the sports who were proposed. There were 4 or 5 sports proposed as eligible to go on to the games, and the IOC did not select any of those to go forward, which is a hopeful fact for baseball and softball. Why not baseball and softball? Baseball had the issue with doping, which now the whole world knows that the IOC was serious about the fact that baseball had issues with doping. And secondly, they didn't have the best athletes. And the deal for the Olympic Games is you have to have your best athletes at those games, which is the case with tennis, with basketball. Because at the end of the day, after you've trained and you compete, who wants to go home saying, well, I was gold medalist, but you know, the really good athletes in that sport weren't allowed to come because they were just too good. It makes no sense. You want to compete against the best athletes in your sport. So that was a problem also for baseball. Now for softball, the only issue was that in the alphabet it came after baseball, and it was all thought to be a truly U.S. sport. Now that's not fair, but that is one view. The other problem was it was not viewed as having enough national federations in it. So they are working very hard to solve that problem. That was the only problem. They, you know, there are no dopes in that sport. They've had no positive dope tests. And they have the best athletes that go to the Olympic Games. So it's a political process. There is room right now because the charter now says, that's our guiding document, the Olympic Charter, says that we should have at least 25, actually it still says 15. We're going to change it, so I'll say 25 sports, and not more than 27. So there's not a lot of room in there. Or is it 28? Maybe 28. All of this you'll find on the website under olympic.org. It is not the most intuitive website, let me tell you, because I have trouble with it. And if I have trouble with it, you might be just fine with it, but it's a bit of a challenge sometimes.
So the other question I had was about what would it take for the ultimate frisbee?
Ah, that's right, ultimate frisbee.
Yes.
Well, you have to have an international federation.
Okay.
And you have to prove that there is only one international federation and that you control all of the sport. You have to prove that you have adopted all of the anti-doping rules. You have to have federations, again, in the number of countries I mentioned, and all of those countries have to have, you know, the whole structure of the sport. You have to have rules, which, as I understand, in ultimate frisbee is one thing that's really not so much a part of it. You know, there have to be standardized rules, let me put it that way. And I think ultimate frisbee, as I know it, is a little more free-form than most of the other Olympic sports. Oh, okay. Educate me. So those are the primary things. You have to show that there is an organization there so that people, you know, kids can grow up and wish to be Olympians in the ultimate frisbee. So there has to be a there. So see you in 2032 or 30, I don't know. Yes?
I have a question about the athletes here. My understanding is they're supposed to be amateur, not exactly professional. So what's the balance here? How do you survive while handling this commercially?
Yeah. Well, here's a question. If they're amateurs, what the heck are they doing? How are they surviving? How do they live? And the same issue I have with athletes in colleges here. Why is it that athletes cannot earn a living from what they do? So in order to keep it more fair, it's not fair, life is not fair, but in some countries the athletes were completely taken care of. In our country, there is no department of sport, there is no minister of sport, because it's all done pretty much through education, but it's all done in the private sector in this country. In other countries, it's a part of the government to provide sports to folks. So since we're dealing with 205 national Olympic committees, 205, that's more than a number of countries that belong to the UN, we decided that the best way to do it was to have the best athletes. And if a National Olympic Committee provides support to those athletes, it's okay. If they don't, it's okay too. The IOC provides a lot of support through what we call Olympic Solidarity to help athletes train. We'll support athletes who are promising athletes. We'll help them train, and we've had many of those athletes actually win medals. So you have to have some kind of support. You can't live in this world without someone finding a way for you to eat and sleep and train. Now, I don't believe that you should only do that. There's some situations where that's pretty much what they do. I think it's important because I know that the springs go at some point. You're not going to be able to take part in sport all your life at the high level, so you need to have something else. And that's becoming more of a problem because a lot of athletes today seem to be focusing so heavily. Just imagine if you you graduated from college and you put the next 8 years focused on competing in the Olympic Games. So you've lost 8 years from progress against the other students who graduated in your class. And now you're going to go back into an industry. And if you hadn't had ties with something during those 8 years, it's going to be really tough to catch up with your peers. So we're working to make sure that athletes don't isolate themselves in the world of sport. In rowing, I knew that was not going to be my future, so I was busy going to law school and becoming an attorney while I was training. Yes?
You mentioned doping in baseball, and I wondered if you had thoughts on the Mitchell report, allegations that came out, and the effect on the game and where they might go in the future.
Yeah, well, it's a problem for the sport. And I imagine that there's a group called, oh shoot, what are they called? I've forgotten the name, it's terrible. But they're statisticians who care deeply about the sport. And I imagine that they could do research and look at the rise of all the injuries and how, athletes were on the disabled list far more frequently over the last 15 years. And I think you'll see that it will probably shadow the rise of the use of these performance-enhancing drugs. In the instance of steroids, they put a huge weight load on the the joints and the tendons. You're naturally not going to carry that much bulk, and so what happens? You get injured much more frequently and much more often. In the case, I will not name names. That's up to Senator Mitchell. But those who use steroids are likely to have increasingly good performances over time. For example, someone who is a batter, just in general a batter, will have more opportunity to create the hand-eye coordination aspect because their body will recover. They can spend more time in the batting cage. And it is true that it will make a difference. I have someone say to me, oh, it doesn't make a difference if you're taking these steroids. You're working just as hard, but it has nothing to do with hand-eye coordination. It most certainly does, because you can spend a whole lot more time testing yourself in the batting cage with that kind of help. So it does make a difference. So it's a shame for the sport. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do about it. In the case of the Olympic Games, although we know for a fact that in the era of the 70s, certainly in the era of the East Germans, there was a magazine that came out that named names of East German athletes who had been doped, and I couldn't find the names of the people I rowed against. And so I asked a friend who was fluent in German. He read it and he started laughing. He said, oh, it just says all of the women. They didn't name names, they just said all of the women. So, but that doesn't change the experience. And some people said we should asterisk that era. I don't know, now it seems a little bit late, although there's some people who were really harmed. There was a great US swimmer whose name is going to escape me at this moment. Shirley Babashoff was one, but there was in the games in '76 who had gone into those games world champion in I think 6 events or 7 events, and she was silver medalist in all of those events and won a gold medal in the relay because the US team just said they were not going to be denied that gold medal. And she complained that the athletes she was competing against were doped, and they called her Surly Shirley. Maybe it was Shirley Babashoff. And, they sort of shunned her, and she was right. She was absolutely right. But you couldn't say anything about it then, because you were like, you're just complaining. Since then, they have apologized to her. A lot of good that does. So what do? You make sure that, as best you can, that you make sure that other athletes don't get away with it. That's what we do. Yes.
What's it gonna take to get the Olympics back in the United States, and Los Angeles? What's gonna get back to Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, I think, suffers from the fact that it's the only city in the world that could host the games with 2 years' notice. We can. We're ready. We are the perpetual Olympic city because we care about sport. We have the facilities. When they bid this time around, there was a group who was bidding to be the city from the U.S. Despite the fact that we'd hosted the games in 1984, their bid had all new venues that are already in existence, with the exception of the Coliseum, which would have to be renewed because they'd have to put the track back in. But we have that many facilities. We have swimming pools. We have everything it takes. So people think, they can wait. Now, so the city this time around is Chicago, and they have a wonderful, wonderful proposal. They have the waterfront area there where they're going to build the village and have rowing and have a lot of the other sports all right there on the waterfront, and it would be a fantastic thing for the athletes. So I'm very supportive of their bid. So as far as coming back to the U.S., think positive thoughts about 2009 in, I think it's mid-October in Copenhagen, Denmark, when the session will gather, that's what we call our annual meeting, the session, will gather and elect the city for 2016. That's our next shot at it. But we've hosted the Olympic Winter Games in 1980, the Olympic Games in 84, the Olympic Games in 96, the Olympic Winter Games in 2002, to say nothing of the Olympic Games in 32, and the Olympic Winter Games in 32, and the Olympic Winter Games in 64. So they'll be back. Nothing else to regale you with. Yes,
What do you
sir.
think about Beijing and the fact that they've had to do a lot of sort of PR image in China to try and make it acceptable to have the Olympics there?
Yeah, I think you're being nice in the way you're asking the question, so thank you for that. There are many people who are saying that the IOC was wrong to select China and Beijing as the host. Many people say that their human rights violations are so horrible that they shouldn't have the right to host the games. Hosting the games has already changed China, not just the city. I was there last August, and it is just moving so fast. The change is throughout every level. And it's not just the fact that now tons of millionaires and even a couple billionaires there. The people there will be hosting the world, and they know that. There are so many college graduates who probably are having a tougher time getting a job than our college graduates are, because they don't have the kind of economy that we have. That we don't have the many jobs that can be created. They don't have that there yet. So there are a lot of college graduates with nothing to do. And there still is abject poverty. There still are some things that we would consider horrible. However, there'll be journalists there reporting on the games. There are people there who are excited about hosting the world. In August, the rowing, we had the Junior World Championships, and all of the rowers stayed at a hotel where they'd never had international guests before. And then they start with rowers, which is giant people and all that. So everything is going to be different for these games. And the most significant thing about any Olympic Games is to contact people to people. It changes people's lives. So, was it a mistake? I don't think so. Can we make things all better all at once? No. It's a 2-week sports event. That's what it is. Although it is a celebration of human excellence, it lasts 2 weeks. So we can't put too many expectations on it. Having said that. But thanks for that question. And I don't think that there'll be a Tibetan team, although there's a group saying that they should have their own National Olympic Committee and their own team. It takes a while. So, what can you guys do for me? What you can do for me is please care about kids having opportunities in sports. Please volunteer. Look for places where you can volunteer. Please support youth sports organizations with your time, or, you know, your money is good too. That can help. But remember that you can do so much for kids through sports, and you can have a lot of fun too. It can make a huge difference in someone's life to be able to take part in sports. You can have that moment of excellence. I can tell you how many of you have had that in sports, who have had a moment where it's just sublime, where something worked so well that you can't even describe it? Yeah, exactly. Mine, I later learned that it was a blind outlet pass. At the moment, I took down a rebound. This is basketball, it wasn't even in rowing. So I took down a rebound, and boom, I passed the ball to my teammate who was at the other end of the court, and she made a basket. Just like that. No thought, no nothing. In the zone. If you have that experience in the zone, you can do it again. And you can have excellence in the rest of your life. And that's why sports is so important. We can make sure that all of our kids are life ready through sports. And I hope that you'll help me make that happen in Southern California. Thank you.